A hand slammed against mahogany. The sound echoed through the Belden Estate Library like a gunshot. Hierin didn't flinch. Not anymore. She'd learned that flinching only encouraged him. "Look at me when I'm talking to you." Arthur Belden's breath reeked of expensive whiskey and entitlement. His fingers found her chin, forcing her face upward. "I asked you a question, sweetheart." Behind them, in the wheelchair by the window, Muyol sat motionless, head down, shoulders curved inward like a man who'd surrendered to gravity itself. The overhead light caught the edge of his glasses, but his eyes, those eyes that once commanded empires, remained fixed on the floor. Arthur glanced back at him and laughed, that cruel theatrical laugh of a man who'd never been told no. "Your husband doesn't seem to mind, does he?" Arthur's thumb traced her jawline. "Can't exactly defend your honor from that chair, can you, friend?" Muyol said nothing, did nothing. The blanket across his lap didn't move. His tattooed arms, once feared across 3 continents, rested limp against the wheelchair's armrests. Hierin set Arthur's other hand slide to her waist, felt his fingers press into the fabric of her uniform. Her heart hammered, but she kept her expression blank, empty, like she'd been trained. Just a little longer, she thought. He just needs a little more time. "You know what I think?" Arthur whispered against her ear. "I think you're wasted on a broken man." The wine glass on the side table shattered. Not from anyone touching it, it simply exploded. Crimson liquid spread across the Persian rug like a bloodstain, glass shards glittering under the chandelier. Arthur jerked back, confused. "What the?" But Hierin was watching her husband, watching the way his right hand, the one Arthur couldn't see from this angle, had closed into a fist so tight his knuckles had gone white. "Not yet," she prayed silently. "Please, not yet." "Clean that up," Arthur ordered, releasing her with a shove. He straightened his tie, suddenly uncomfortable. "And tell your useless husband to stop breaking my things with his, I don't know, his cripple energy or whatever." He left the library laughing at his own joke. Hierin waited until his footsteps faded. Then she knelt beside the wheelchair, her hands finding her husband's trembling fists. "Yobo," she whispered, "my love, not tonight, please." When Muyol finally looked up, his eyes held the kind of darkness that had once made grown men weep. "How much longer?" "2 more days." She pressed her forehead to his scarred knuckles. "The last of them arrives in Seoul in 2 days. Then you can stand. Then you can show them why the dragon never really died." His jaw clenched. "He touched you." "He thinks you're broken." Hiren's voice was steel wrapped in silk. "That's exactly what we need him to think. A predator is careless when he believes his prey can't fight back." Muyol's hand found her face, thumb brushing away a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. "When this is over," he said quietly, "I'm going to teach Arthur Belden the difference between a man in a wheelchair and a tiger lying in wait." That night, after the Belden family had gone to bed, Hierin helped her husband from the wheelchair. She watched him walk to their small servants' quarters on legs that worked perfectly. Watched him open encrypted messages on a laptop that would make intelligence agencies weep with envy. The disabled Korean man checked stock portfolios worth billions, approved sanctions that would destroy companies, signed digital orders that would reshape Seoul's underworld. All while Arthur Belden slept upstairs, dreaming of a quiet maid he believed he could own. Friends, before we continue, let me ask you something. Have you subscribed yet? If not, please do. It helps us bring you more stories like this. Drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. It means everything. Now, let's go back to the beginning. Back to Seoul, 6 months ago, to the night the dragon was supposed to die. The bullet hit Muyol in the chest. Not in the movie's dramatic way. No slow motion, no chance for final words. Just a crack of gunfire in the underground parking garage, and then the pavement rushing up to meet him. Hyrin screamed. She was running toward him before the second shot rang out, her nursing training the only thing keeping her focused. Pressure on the wound. Check for exit wound. Keep him conscious. Yebo, stay with me. Her hands were red, so red. Stay with me. His blood pooled beneath them both, mixing with motor oil and rainwater. Above, she could hear shouting, running footsteps. The Soul Syndicate was tearing itself apart, and she was losing the only man she'd ever loved on the concrete floor of a parking garage. Muyol's hand found hers. His grip was weak but insistent. "Run," he whispered. Blood bubbled at the corner of his mouth. "They'll kill you to hurt me." "I'm not leaving you." She pressed harder on the wound, felt his life trying to escape through her fingers. "I didn't survive your mother's disapproval, your enemy's threats, and 5 years of marriage to the most stubborn man in Korea just to lose you to a bullet." Something like a laugh rattled in his chest. "Stubborn, that's rich." The ambulance arrived 4 minutes later. 4 minutes that felt like 4 hours. 4 minutes during which Hyren made a decision that would change everything. If they wanted Kwon Muyol dead, she would give them a corpse. Not a real one, but close enough. A broken man, a defeated king. Someone the Seoul underworld would write off as yesterday's threat. She whispered the plan into his ear as the paramedics loaded him onto the stretcher, watched understanding dawn in his eyes despite the pain. Saw him nod, almost imperceptibly. The Dragon of Seoul died that night in the emergency room. What emerged 3 months later was a quiet couple looking for domestic work, a disabled man and his devoted wife, invisible people, harmless people. Perfect bait for the traitors still hiding in Muyol's organization. Perfect camouflage for a predator learning to hunt from a wheelchair. And when the wealthy Belden family posted an ad for a maid and a handyman who wouldn't mind if the handyman had limitations, Hyrin knew they'd found their hiding place. She just didn't know that Arthur Belden would become the first man to learn what happened when you threatened a dragon's mate. That lesson was still 6 months away, but it was coming. The surgeon's hands were still bloody when he delivered the news. "He'll live, but the damage to his spine—" Dr. Park hesitated, glancing at Hayren's face. "I'm sorry, the bullet fractured 2 vertebrae. Even with surgery, the chances of him walking again are—" "Thank you, doctor." Hayren's voice was steady, empty. "May I see him?" She waited until Dr. Park left. Then she walked into the recovery room where Muyol lay connected to machines that beeped his survival in steady rhythm, and she locked the door behind her. His eyes opened immediately, sharp, alert, nothing like a man who'd just survived spinal surgery. Did he buy it? Muyol's voice was rough from the breathing tube, but clear. Completely. Heron pulled a chair close, her hand finding his. "I bribed the radiologist. The scans show exactly what we need them to show. As far as Seoul's underworld knows, Kwon Muyol is paralyzed from the waist down." "And the shooter?" "Dead, but not before your cousin made him talk." Her fingers tightened around his. "It was Min Jae, your own lieutenant. He's been selling information to the Yakuza for 8 months. Muyol's jaw clenched, but he wasn't surprised. That was the worst part. He'd suspected betrayal, just hadn't known from whom. How many others? "We don't know yet. That's why—" She took a breath. "That's why we need to disappear. Completely. Let them think you're broken. Let the traitors reveal themselves when they believe the throne is empty." For a long moment, Muyol stared at the ceiling. She knew what he was calculating, the empire he'd built over 15 years, the power he'd have to pretend to surrender, the pride he'd have to swallow. "I'm sorry," he finally said. "You married a king. Now you'll have to pretend to be married to—" "I married you." Heron leaned forward until her forehead touched his. "King, cripple, or corpse. The man is what matters, not the throne." His hand found her face, thumb tracing the path of tears she'd been holding back since the gunshot. "They'll humiliate us. Wherever we hide, whatever work we take, people will look at the wheelchair and think they know what I am. Let them think it. Her voice turned to steel. A predator in a wheelchair is still a predator, just one nobody sees coming. 3 weeks later, they disappeared. No funeral, that would invite too many questions, just a quiet transfer to a private rehabilitation facility that didn't exist. Quan Mule's empire fell into chaos without him, exactly as planned. His cousin assumed temporary control, watching carefully to see which lieutenants reach for power too eagerly. And in a small apartment on the outskirts of Seoul, Hai Rin taught her husband how to move like a broken man, how to slump, how to let his legs drag when transferring to the wheelchair, how to make people uncomfortable enough that they'd look away. "You're terrifying," Mule said after a particularly convincing performance. "You know that." She smiled, checking the job listings on her laptop. "I learned from the best." That's when she found it. Wealthy estate seeks live-in staff, maid and handyman, accommodations provided, discretion required. The Belden family posting. Their perfect hiding place. Their perfect trap. Arthur Belden first noticed the maid on a Tuesday. She was polishing silver in the morning room, her movements efficient and practiced, dark hair pulled back in a simple bun, no makeup, the kind of quiet beauty that didn't demand attention but somehow commanded it anyway. What caught his eye wasn't just her face, it was the way she moved, graceful, controlled, like someone who'd learned to make herself small. He'd seen that before in women who'd been taught their place. He liked that. "You," he snapped his fingers. "Coffee. Black. Now." She set down the silver without a word, without meeting his eyes, and disappeared toward the kitchen. Arthur watched her go, then glanced at the wheelchair-bound man sitting by the window. The husband. What was his name? Mule? Mayol? Some foreign thing Arthur couldn't be bothered to pronounce correctly. The man sat motionless, head bowed, staring at the carpet like it held the secrets of the universe. Pathetic. Arthur had asked his mother why they'd hired a useless cripple, and she'd said something about tax deductions and appearing charitable. "Hey," Arthur walked over, standing directly in the man's line of sight. "You speak English?" Mule's head lifted slightly. He nodded once, slowly, like the effort cost him. "Your wife is very pretty," Arthur smiled, watching for a reaction. "You're a lucky man. Well, you were before." He gestured vaguely at the wheelchair. Nothing. The man's expression remained blank, defeated. His eyes dropped back to the floor. Arthur felt a thrill run through him. This was going to be easy. Over the next 2 weeks, he tested boundaries. A hand on Hayren's lower back when she passed, comments about how the uniform flattered her, requests that she work late, alone, in his wing of the mansion. She never complained, never looked him in the eye, just nodded and obeyed. And the husband? He sat in his wheelchair, staring at nothing, while Arthur circled his wife like a shark. "Does he ever talk?" Arthur asked one evening, finding Hayren folding laundry in the hall. The wheelchair was parked nearby, its occupant motionless as always. "Very little, sir." Her voice was soft, respectful. The injury affected more than just his legs. "Shame." Arthur leaned against the wall, blocking her path. "Must be lonely for you, a woman like you, stuck with." He glanced at Mule with theatrical pity. "That." Her hand stilled on the towel she was folding. For just a second, Arthur thought he saw something flash in her eyes, something sharp. Then it was gone, replaced by that same practiced emptiness. "I should finish the laundry, sir." "Of course." He stepped aside, but not before letting his hand brush her arm. "You know where to find me if you ever need anything." That night, Arthur lay in bed imagining scenarios. The quiet maid, the broken husband who couldn't stop him, the estate so large that no one would hear if she screamed. He was already planning his next move when sleep finally took him. In the servants' quarters, Hierin helped her husband undress for bed. Her hands found the muscles in his back, perfectly functional, coiled with tension. 2 more weeks, she whispered. Can you last 2 more weeks? Mule's response was a sound that wasn't quite human, something between a growl and a promise. Good, Hiren said, and kissed the scars the bullet had left behind, because he's almost ready to make his fatal mistake. The estate fell silent after midnight. Hiren locked their door, a simple hook-and-eye latch that wouldn't stop anyone determined, but would buy them seconds if needed. Seconds were enough for Mule to collapse back into the chair, to become broken again. She turned to find him already standing. He moved like water, soundless and fluid, rolling his shoulders to release the tension from 8 hours of forced stillness. The blanket that had covered his useless legs lay discarded on the wheelchair. His eyes, dull and vacant all day, now burned with the focus of a predator. Let me see. Hiren's voice was barely a whisper. Mule lifted his shirt. The scar tissue from the bullet wound stretched across his chest, angry and red even months later. She traced it gently, her nurse's fingers checking for inflammation, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath. It's healing well. She pressed a kiss to the damaged skin. Another month and it won't pull when you move. I can move fine now. His hand caught hers, bringing it to his lips. I could have stood up 6 times today. Do you know what it costs me to sit there while he touches you? I know. She did. She saw it in the way his jaw clenched, the way his hands gripped the wheelchair arms until his knuckles went white. Show me what you were watching. Mule moved to their small desk, hidden behind a false panel in the closet, and opened his laptop. The screen came alive with windows most people wouldn't recognize. Encrypted messaging apps, stock market terminals, live feeds from security cameras positioned throughout Seoul's financial district. The Yakuza made their move today. His fingers flew across the keyboard. They tried to acquire my shipping company through a shell corporation. I outbid them using Min Jae's own offshore accounts. A cold smile. He still doesn't know I've had access to his finances for 3 months. Yoreen read over his shoulder. Numbers that would make most people's heads spin. Billions changing hands in transactions designed to look legitimate. Her husband's empire hadn't collapsed when he died. It had merely gone underground, controlled by the man everyone thought was staring uselessly at carpets. And the list? She asked quietly. He pulled up a document. 8 names. 3 were already crossed out in red. These 3 sold information. They've been handled. He didn't elaborate. He never did. 5 left. Min Jae is here in Seoul, waiting for confirmation that I'm truly gone before he makes his final move for the throne. How long? 10 days, maybe less. Mule closed the laptop, his expression hardening. But Arthur is becoming a problem. Today he cornered you in the pantry. Tomorrow I'll handle it the same way. Yoreen turned him to face her. You taught me how to endure, Yobo, how to be steel wrapped in silk. I can survive 10 more days of Arthur Belden's hands. You shouldn't have to. No. She kissed him, tasting the rage he kept buried beneath the mask. But in 10 days, he'll learn what happens when you harass a queen pretending to be a maid. Mule pulled her close, breathing in the scent of her hair. When this is over, I'm burning this wheelchair. When this is over, Yoreen corrected, you're going to make them all kneel. The new schedule appeared on Thursday morning. Hiren found it taped to the servant's board in the kitchen, a handwritten note in Arthur's careless scrawl. Maid will now handle evening duties in the East Wing, 9 p.m. to midnight. Master Arthur's quarters require special attention. Mrs. Chen, the head housekeeper, wouldn't meet her eyes. I'm sorry, he insisted, said you were the only one who cleaned it to his standards. They both knew what standards he meant. That night, Hiren kissed her husband's forehead before leaving their quarters. Muyo's hand caught her wrist, his grip careful but firm. Take the phone. His voice was low, dangerous. Keep the line open. If he won't. She squeezed his hand. Not yet. He's still playing, testing boundaries. And when he stops playing, she met his eyes, those eyes that had ordered executions, that had built an empire on calculated violence. Then you'll hear everything, and you'll know it's time. The East Wing was deliberately isolated. Thick carpets swallowed sound. The other staff quarters were 3 hallways away. Arthur had engineered perfect privacy. He was waiting in his study, bourbon in hand, still dressed in his day clothes, not the casual comfort of someone ready for bed, but the calculated presentation of a man expecting company. "There you are," he smiled. "I was beginning to think you'd forgotten about me." "Never, sir. Where would you like me to start?" "Here," he gestured to the floor near his desk, an area that didn't need cleaning. "I spilled something earlier. Sticky. You'll have to get on your knees." Hiren knelt without comment, pulling supplies from her caddy. The phone in her pocket was a small weight against her hip, connected, recording. Muyo would be listening to every word. Arthur moved behind her, too close. She could smell the bourbon, the expensive cologne that couldn't quite mask his sweat. "You're very obedient." His voice came from directly above her. "I like that. Your husband trained you well back when he could still train things." Her hands continued scrubbing, steady, mechanical. "Does he know you're here, in my rooms, late at night?" Arthur's shoe appeared in her peripheral vision, inches from her hand. "Does he care anymore? I see the way he sits there, drooling, staring at nothing. That's not a man, that's furniture." In their quarters, Muyel's free hand, the one not holding his own phone, closed around the wheelchair's armrest. The metal groaned. "I wonder," Arthur continued, his voice dropping to something that thought it was seduction, "what it would take to make you forget about him, what it would take to make you realize you're wasting yourself on damaged goods." His hand touched her shoulder. Hye-rin stood smoothly, efficiently, putting the desk between them. "The floor is clean, sir. Will there be anything else?" Arthur's expression flickered, surprised, then annoyed. Women didn't walk away from him. "Yes, tomorrow night, same time. And Hye-rin?" He said her name like he owned it. "Wear the other uniform, the one with the shorter skirt." She left without responding. Back in their quarters, Muyel was standing when she entered. His face was a mask of barely controlled violence. "6 more days," Hye-rin said before he could speak. "We need 6 more days." His hands were shaking. "I've killed men for less." "I know." She took those shaking hands in hers, "and soon you'll destroy him too, but not yet." Arthur's Aston Martin exploded at 6 a.m. Not literally, that would have been too obvious, but the engine seized with a grinding screech that could be heard across the estate, followed by a plume of black smoke that poured from under the hood like a demon escaping hell. "What the fuck?" Arthur stood in the driveway in his robe, staring at the $300,000 car that had been perfectly fine 12 hours ago. What the actual fuck? The mechanic arrived 2 hours later, his face grim as he examined the damage. "Someone put metal shavings in your oil, ground the engine to pieces. This was deliberate, Mr. Belden." "Who?" Arthur's face went red. "Who the hell would—" His eyes snapped to the wheelchair by the garden path. The cripple sat motionless as always, positioned where the morning sun hit the roses. He'd been there since dawn, apparently, just sitting, staring. Useless. Arthur dismissed the thought immediately. A man who couldn't walk couldn't exactly sabotage a car. But that evening, he found Hiren in the hallway and grabbed her arm, harder than necessary, fingers digging in until she gasped. "Did you touch my car?" "No, sir." Her voice was steady despite the pain. "I don't go near the garage." "Someone did. He pulled her closer, his breath hot on her face. "Someone in this house fucked with my property. If I find out it was you or that vegetable husband of yours." The lights flickered. Just once. Just enough to make Arthur glance up, distracted. When he looked back down, Hiren had positioned herself differently, weight shifted, ready to move. For a second, Arthur saw something in her stance that looked almost trained. Then she was meek again, eyes downcast. He released her with a shove. "Get out of my sight." She left quickly, but not before Arthur caught sight of the wheelchair at the end of the hall. Had it been there a moment ago? He couldn't remember. The cripple sat slumped as always, head down, hands limp in his lap, but something felt wrong. That night, Arthur's laptop crashed. Not a simple freeze, a complete system failure that wiped 3 years of personal files. His backup drives? Also corrupted. The IT specialist he called said it looked like a targeted attack, something sophisticated. "You have enemies, Mr. Belden?" Arthur thought about the business deals he'd made, the people he'd stepped on climbing his father's empire. Too many to count. But none of them had access to his bedroom. The next morning he found his custom suits, all 16 of them, slashed to ribbons in his closet. Clean cuts, surgical precision, not vandalism, a message. Arthur stood among the ruins of Italian wool and silk, his hands trembling with rage and something else, something that felt uncomfortably like fear. He stormed through the house until he found the wheelchair in the library. The man sat reading, or pretending to, a book about roses of all things. "Look at me," Arthur's voice cracked like a whip. Slowly, with effort that seemed genuine, the man's head lifted. His eyes were dull behind those thick glasses, empty, bovine. "Did you do this?" Arthur demanded. "Any of this?" The man blinked. Once, twice. Then his head dropped again, like a puppet with cut strings. Arthur wanted to flip the wheelchair, to grab the useless bastard and shake him until something resembling life appeared. But you couldn't fight someone who wouldn't fight back. In the doorway, Irene appeared with fresh linens. She glanced at her husband, then at Arthur. "Will you be needing anything, sir?" Arthur's fist clenched. "Get him out of my sight." As she wheeled Muyel away, Arthur could have sworn, just for a second, he heard the cripple laugh. But when he spun around, the man's face was blank, as always, empty as a grave. Arthur found the blue container while Irene was emptying trash in the West Wing. He'd entered the servants' quarters without knocking. His house, his rules, looking for his missing cufflinks. The maid had probably mixed them with the laundry. That's what he told himself anyway. The truth was simpler. He wanted an excuse to go through her things. The containers sat on their small dresser, partially hidden behind folded uniforms, medical-grade plastic, the kind hospitals used. Arthur opened it. Inside, surgical bandages, Israeli combat gauze, quick clot packets, prescription pain medication with labels scratched off, sterile sutures, and a vial of something that looked like morphine. This wasn't a first aid kit. This was trauma supplies, expensive trauma supplies. What the hell? Arthur pulled out his phone, photographing the contents. This was theft. Had to be. The maid was stealing from hospitals, maybe selling on the black market. He could use this, get her deported, arrested, whatever, get her scared enough that she'd... "Those are mine." Arthur spun. Irene stood in the doorway, her expression still calm, but something sharp glinting beneath. "Yours?" he laughed. "Right. And I suppose you need military-grade medical supplies for what, exactly? Paper cuts?" "My husband." She moved into the room, not backing down. "His injuries require specialized care. The insurance from his accident doesn't cover..." "Bullshit." Arthur held up the morphine vial. "This is controlled. You can't just buy this. You stole it." "I'm a registered nurse." Her voice remained steady, but her hands had curled into fists.
I have prescriptions. Everything in that container is legal. Then you won't mind if I call the police to verify. For the first time since he'd met her, Hiren's mask cracked. Real, visceral fear, not of the police, of something else. Please, the word came out quiet. Please don't. Arthur felt power surge through him. Finally, give me one good reason why I shouldn't report this right now. Behind them, a sound, a small, choked noise. They both turned to find Muyal in the doorway, still in his wheelchair. But something was different. His head was up. His eyes, those empty, dull eyes, were locked on Arthur with an intensity that made the air feel thin. Yobo, Hiren moved toward him quickly. It's okay, go back to... He's threatening you. Muyal's voice was rough from disuse, but clear. Too clear. Arthur felt the hairs on his neck stand up. I'm not threatening anyone, Arthur forced a laugh. I'm just asking reasonable questions about stolen medical supplies. Muyal's hands gripped the wheelchair arms. For a second, just a second, Arthur saw the muscles in his forearms tense, saw his legs shift beneath the blanket like he was about to stand. Then Hiren was there, her hand on her husband's shoulder, pressing down, whispering something in Korean that sounded like a warning. The man slumped back. The light went out of his eyes. He was broken again. But Arthur had seen it, that moment, that flash of something that looked like coiled violence. Get out. Hiren's voice cut through his thoughts. Please, just get out. Arthur left, the blue container clutched in his hands like evidence. But as he walked away, he couldn't shake the feeling that he'd just made a terrible mistake, that he'd poked something that had been playing dead, and that it was about to wake up. Arthur waited until evening when the other staff had retired. He'd spent all day planning this. The parlor was his father's favorite room, all dark wood and oil paintings of dead Beldens, the kind of space designed to make people feel small. Perfect. He'd positioned the cripple's wheelchair in the center, facing the fireplace, made it seem casual, like he just wanted to talk to the couple about the medical supply situation. Muyal's hands gripped the wheelchair arms. For a second, just a second, Arthur saw the muscles in his forearms tense, saw his legs shift beneath the blanket like he was about to stand. Then Hiren was there, her hand on her husband's shoulder, pressing down, whispering something in Korean that sounded like a warning. The man slumped back. The light went out of his eyes. He was broken again. But Arthur had seen it, that moment, that flash of something that looked like coiled violence. Get out. Hiren's voice cut through his thoughts. Please, just get out. Arthur left, the blue container clutched in his hands like evidence. But as he walked away, he couldn't shake the feeling that he'd just made a terrible mistake, that he'd poked something that had been playing dead, and that it was about to wake up. Good. Let him be angry. Angry and helpless was exactly what Arthur wanted. Hiren answered last, summoned by Mrs. Chen. She stopped in the doorway when she saw the setup, her eyes darting to her husband. Close the door, Arthur said. She did, slowly. So, Arthur poured himself a scotch, taking his time. I've been thinking about our little situation, the stolen medical supplies, the mysterious accidents around my property, and I've come to a conclusion. He walked behind Muyel's wheelchair, one hand landing on the man's shoulder. Muyel flinched, actually flinched, and Arthur felt a thrill of power. You two are running some kind of scam. I don't know what yet, but I will figure it out. He squeezed the shoulder harder. The question is, what do I do about it? We're not, Hiren started. Shut up. Arthur's voice cracked like a whip. I'm not talking to you yet. I'm talking to your husband, or trying to. Does he understand English anymore, or did the accident take that too? Muyel said nothing. His head remained down, but Arthur could see his chest rising and falling faster now, breathing hard. Look at me. Arthur grabbed the man's chin, forcing his head up. Behind those thick glasses, Muyel's eyes were... what? Afraid?
No, something else. Something that made Arthur's hand want to pull away. But he didn't. He held on, feeling the tremor in the man's jaw. I want you to watch this. Arthur released him and turned to Hayren. Come here. She didn't move. I said, come here. Arthur crossed to her in 3 strides, grabbing her arm and dragging her to the center of the room, directly in front of the wheelchair. You think you can steal from me, damage my property in my own house? We didn't. His hand caught her face. Not quite a slap, but close. A warning. Don't lie to me. In the wheelchair, Muyel made a sound, low, guttural, almost animal. Arthur smiled. Finally, a reaction. What's that? He grabbed Hayren's chin the same way he'd grabbed her husband's. Is he trying to protect you? That's sweet, really. But what's he going to do? Arthur's other hand found Hayren's waist, pulling her against him. Stop me from this? Her body went rigid. Arthur felt it, the way she was trembling, the way her breath came short. Fear. Finally, she was afraid. Please, her voice cracked. Please don't. Don't what? Arthur's hand slid lower. You're in my house, wearing my uniform. You're mine to do with as I... The wheelchair moved. Not rolled, moved. Like something inside it had shifted, redistributed weight. Arthur glanced over. Muyal's head was still down, but his hands... Those hands Arthur had assumed were useless were gripping the armrest so hard the leather was tearing. Is something wrong? Arthur mocked. Do you have something to say? No? Then sit there and watch what happens when people try to fuck with Arthur Belden. He turned back to Hayren, his hand tightening on her waist. And that's when he felt it. The temperature in the room dropped. Not literally, but something shifted. Some predatory instinct in Arthur's brain, the one inherited from ancestors who'd survived by knowing when they were prey, suddenly screamed at him to run. He looked at the wheelchair. Muyal's head was rising, slowly, deliberately, and his eyes, those empty, broken eyes, were burning with something that looked like the promise of death. Let her go. The voice that came from the cripple's mouth wasn't weak, wasn't broken. It was the voice of a man who'd ordered executions. Arthur's hand fell away from Hayren because Kwan Muyal was standing up. The blanket fell first. It slid from Muyal's lap like shed skin, pooling at the base of the wheelchair. Then his legs, those supposedly useless, paralyzed legs, planted firmly on the Persian rug. Arthur's brain couldn't process what he was seeing. What? You can't. I can. Muyal rose from the chair with the fluid grace of a predator uncoiling. No hesitation, no weakness. 6 months of pretending erased in a single moment. I've always been able to. He removed his glasses, folding them carefully and setting them on the wheelchair's armrest. Without them, his face transformed. The soft, defeated features sharpened into something carved from stone and violence. Arthur stumbled backward. This is... You've been faking? This whole time? Yes. Muyal rolled his shoulders, vertebrae cracking after hours of forced stillness. He was taller than Arthur had realized, broader. The humble cardigan he wore couldn't hide the muscle underneath. The body of a man who'd built an empire with his bare hands. The question is, why do you think we would do that? Hayren moved, not away from the danger, but behind her husband. Not hiding, positioning. Her hand went to his shoulder, a touch that was equal parts affection and signal. Arthur's survival instincts finally kicked in. He lunged for the door. Muyal was faster. He didn't run. Running would have been too obvious, too desperate. He simply moved, closing the distance between them in 3 silent steps that shouldn't have been possible for a man who'd been sitting all day. His hand caught the back of Arthur's collar, and suddenly Arthur was airborne, thrown back into the center of the room. He hit the floor hard, gasping. Don't. Muyal's voice was conversational, almost pleasant.
I've been sitting still for 6 months watching you put your hands on my wife. Do you have any idea what that costs a man like me?" He crouched down, bringing his face level with Arthur's. "The restraint it requires?" "I'll call the police." Arthur's voice was high, panicked. "I'll have you arrested for assault." "With what phone?" Hee-Rin's voice came from behind him. She held up Arthur's cell phone. When had she taken it? This one? The one that's now in pieces? She dropped the shattered device on the floor. Arthur scrambled backward until his spine hit the wall. This couldn't be happening. The maid was a maid. The cripple was a cripple. The world had rules. "Let me tell you a story," Muyol said, moving to the bar and pouring himself Arthur's expensive scotch. He drank it in one swallow, savoring it. 6 months ago, someone tried to kill me, put a bullet in my chest. Should have died. He poured another glass. "But I'm hard to kill. Ask the 7 other men who tried." "You're insane," Arthur's voice cracked. "Both of you are. We're practical." Hee-Rin moved to stand beside her husband, her posture completely different now, shoulders back, chin up. The meek maid had vanished, replaced by someone who looked like she could dismantle a man in 12 different ways. We needed to disappear. We needed my husband's enemies to think he was broken, harmless. We needed them to reveal themselves. And they did. Muyol smiled, and it was the coldest thing Arthur had ever seen. All of them. Every traitor in my organization showed their face over the past 6 months, thinking the throne was empty, thinking the dragon was dead. The parlor door opened. 3 men entered, not staff. These were something else. Dressed in black, moving with military precision, they positioned themselves around the room with practiced ease. "Who?" Arthur's voice died in his throat. "My people," Muyol said simply. "They've been watching this estate for 3 weeks, watching you, documenting every time you touched her, every threat you made." He crouched down again, close enough that Arthur could see the scar tissue on his chest through his open collar. "Do you know what they call me in Seoul?" Arthur shook his head, mute with terror. "The dragon." Muyol's hand shot out, gripping Arthur's throat. Not choking, just holding, a promise. "And you, stupid boy, just touched the dragon's mate." The phone call came at 9:47 p.m. Arthur sat on the parlor floor, flanked by Muyol's men, listening to his father scream through the speaker. Something about SEC investigations, frozen accounts, criminal charges. The words blurred together into a symphony of destruction. "How?" Arthur's voice was hollow. "How did you—" "I had 6 months with nothing to do but sit in a wheelchair and dismantle your family's empire." Muyol straightened his cufflinks. When had he changed into a tailored suit? "Do you know how many illegal transactions your father has made? How many bribes? How many offshore accounts? How many laws broken?" He smiled. "I do. I documented all of them. The FBI received a very detailed package an hour ago." Red and blue lights flickered through the parlor windows. "That's your ride," Hee-Rin said, pulling on a coat that looked nothing like her maid's uniform. Cashmere, expensive, the kind of thing a queen would wear. "Assault, conspiracy, tax evasion. They have videos of you threatening me, texts you sent to friends bragging about what you planned to do." She tilted her head. "You should have wondered why I never fought back. I was collecting evidence." The doorbell rang. Not a polite request, a demand. One of Muyol's men opened it. Federal agents flooded the entrance hall like a dark tide. Badges out, voices sharp with authority. "Arthur Belden, you're under arrest." Arthur lunged one last time, desperate, reaching for Hee-Rin with fingers that wanted to hurt, to mark, to prove he still had power. Muyol's hand caught his wrist mid-air. The grip was iron, crushing. Something in Arthur's wrist cracked. "Touch her again," Muyol said quietly, "and they'll find pieces of you scattered across 3 continents." He released Arthur into the waiting hands of federal agents. "Actually, don't touch her again. I'd hate to waste the effort." 20 minutes later, Arthur was in handcuffs, being led to a police car. His father's Bentley was already gone, probably racing toward lawyers who couldn't save him. The estate staff watched from windows, some with satisfaction, some with fear. Mrs. Chen caught Hairin's eye and nodded once. Respect, understanding. Muyol's men melted away like smoke, their work finished. In the circular driveway, a black Mercedes sedan waited, engine purring. Not a rental. This was soul money, old money, dangerous money. The driver opened the door. "Shall we go home, sir?" he asked in Korean. Muyol helped Hairin into the back seat, his hand at the small of her back, protective, possessive, the way he'd wanted to touch her for 6 months but couldn't. As they pulled away from the Belden estate, Hairin watched through the rear window. Agents were carrying boxes of evidence from the house. More police cars arrived. The neighbors were coming out now, phones up, filming the fall of a dynasty. "Your cousin called," she said quietly. "Min Jae is in custody. He tried to run when he heard you were alive. Didn't make it past Incheon Airport." "And the others?" "Handled." She leaned against his shoulder, feeling the solid warmth of him. Real, whole, no longer pretending. "Your empire is secure." Muyol pulled her closer, breathing in the scent of her hair. "Not my empire. Ours." The Mercedes turned onto the highway, heading toward the private airport where a jet waited, soul-bound, home. "Do you regret it?" Hairin asked. 6 months of sitting still, of being invisible. Every second. His hand found hers, their fingers intertwining. "But it taught me something important." "What?" "That power isn't about who sees you standing." Muyol's eyes reflected the city lights streaming past. "It's about who never sees you coming." Behind them, the Belden estate disappeared into the distance, another ruin in the dragon's wake. Ahead, Seoul waited, a city of neon and shadows, where whispers were already spreading. The dragon hadn't died, he'd merely been sleeping, and now he was awake. In the front seat, the driver made a call. 3 words in Korean, crisp and clear. "The king returns." Across the city, those who thought the throne was empty began to understand their mistake. Some ran, some begged, some simply waited for the inevitable. Hairin watched her husband's reflection in the window. This man who'd pretended to be broken to protect her, who'd endured humiliation to secure their future, who'd burned an empire to ash for daring to touch what was his. "Welcome home, Yebo," she whispered. Muyol smiled, not the cold, threatening smile he'd given Arthur, but something warmer, something that was only ever hers. "We're not home yet, but we will be soon." The Mercedes accelerated into the night, carrying a king and queen back to their throne, and in its wake, it left only ghosts and warnings. Never touch the dragon's mate. Never assume the silent are weak, and never, ever mistake patience for powerlessness.